Give everyone a couple of seconds more. Welcome as you make your way in. We are so delighted that you are here with us today for our conversation, the why, what, how, and who of writing a statement of belief. My name is Emily Sandilands. I am Zingtrain's community builder, and I'm going to be your host today. And I'm thrilled to be here alongside our two presenters. We have Ari Weinsweig, who is Zingerman's founding partner. Hi, Ari.
Hello, Emily.
And we also have Zingtrain's fabulous managing partner, Katie Frank, here with us. Hi, Katie.
Hello, Emily.
We also have Mara Ferguson here. She is our keynote liaison at Zingtrain. She is here behind the scenes. You're going to see her in the chat, working the chat with me. So we are coming to you live from all over Ann Arbor, Michigan, but we would love to hear where you're tuning in from. So if you can navigate the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen there and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'll do a roll call. Folks from all over. Oh, Texas, California, Michigan. Fantastic. Some
Hello, Sarah Woods.
Oh, India. Wonderful. Keep those coming in. We look forward to
Germany,
the location.
Canada.
This is a global webinar. That's really exciting. We are going to dive into the good stuff here very soon, but before we do that, I would love to go over just a little bit of housekeeping with you. As far as the format of today's conversation, Ari and Katie are going to be chatting here for a bit, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to submit those throughout the webinar. We may pepper those in and get to those as we're talking. To submit any questions you may have, if you navigate the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen there, feel free to drop those in anytime you have them. We're going to do our very best to get to as many of those as we can. Should we not get to your question, we will get back to you, follow up with answers in the days to come. There is closed captioning available during the presentation today. So if you'd like to turn that on, also at the bottom of your Zoom screen there is a closed captioning button. You can get captions on screen by clicking show subtitle, or you can get the full transcript to the right of today's presentation by clicking view full transcript. The last item of business here is we are recording the conversation today, and we will be sending out the recording and the slides to you in the days to come. So look out for that in your inbox soon. We are also going to be putting it on our website at zingtrain.com in our library, where it will live for all of time with all of our past webinars. You can check it out there. And okay, I think I'm ready to turn it over to Katie to get us started.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily. It is a real pleasure to be here with you all. We are in the process of releasing our statement of beliefs in our organization, and this is the first new organization-wide foundational tool that we've added, I think, in about 6 or 7 years or more. So I really look forward to talking with Ari on the background of beliefs, why we feel it's so important to explore our organizational beliefs and document them, and then share a little bit about our new statement of beliefs that we're in the process of rolling out, and really get you all thinking on why we feel like this is such an important tool organizationally. So in terms of beliefs, want to check, so Ari, the format will be, I'll ask some questions, Ari will ask some, answer the questions, and we will hopefully have a really good conversation about beliefs. So Ari, if you haven't attended a webinar with us before, Ari will often answer questions as we go throughout, so you don't have to feel like you got to wait till the end. So Ari, if you would be willing to share, where did you first learn about beliefs?
Well, Katie, good morning.
Good morning.
I love your necklace. Hi, everybody. It's awesome to see all these familiar names and some unfamiliar that I look forward to meeting. Where did I first learn about beliefs? Well, the direct answer is going to be the same way everybody else does. As an infant, unconsciously learning them from the people around me, my parents, grandparents, other people in the family. And then as I got older, I learned them from everything from, in no particular order, school, teachers, classmates, network news, musicians, baseball players. Really, we learn them from everybody. So that continued on apace, I would say, for most of my beliefs, most of my life, starting to be influenced more and more by books and learning. And as I left home, mentally and then physically, more and more by people outside that circle. That's continued on a pace. Where I first started to understand, I guess, beliefs in the context that we're going to talk about it today. Yeah, baseball players, shall we? Football players, I don't know, athletes. Where I first started to understand beliefs in the context that we're talking about today is probably 6 years ago, I'm going to guess, ballpark, when I was reading Bob and Judith Wright's book, Transform. Bob wrote the foreword for part 3, and I have known him directly and indirectly for many decades in my parts of my life. And he and Judith own or run the Wright Institute in Chicago. But anyway, I was reading their book, and in there was this little self-fulfilling belief cycle, which maybe Mara can throw in the chat, that kind of blew my mind. Bob, when I asked him, he said he doesn't remember who taught it to him, so I don't really know who to give ultimate credit to, but I learned it from Bob and Judith, so I'm going to give credit to them. And as I've said a few times, it sort of turned out to actually be a good life metaphor, because although we claim that we learned something somewhere, we really rarely know all of the people who contributed to our own lives and to the community of which we're a part and to what we do. So this little self-fulfilling belief cycle, thank you for throwing it up there. It did blow my mind. It helped me to understand some organizational challenges that I was frustrated with at the time, where we had tried we had tried all of the various tools that many people on this call know that we use: visioning, diversity of work group, different ages, responsibility levels, working on it, shared metrics. I mean, all the things that we knew how to do, and none of them were really working effectively. And when I saw this belief cycle and started to understand it, it really gave me an insight and a level of understanding that I had not had previously, which was quite simply the people in the work group either A, didn't believe in the work, or B, they believed in the work but didn't believe it was their work. It was somebody else's work to do. So this is where I started on it, and that over a period of years turned into a very large book that became The Power of Beliefs in Business, where I kept studying and learning and studying and learning and starting to look at how to apply it to the organization. So that's where it all came from.
Awesome. Will you define beliefs? Because I think there's sometimes there can be some, well, as we think about defining beliefs, we often think about guiding principles and we have beliefs. And I know that sometimes those feel like there's an intersection. And so I think it would be helpful before we get further into beliefs, like how you think about beliefs. Then I pulled a definition also that I can share after you share your thoughts.
Okay, so I guess for me, when I started to work on beliefs, I consciously was looking at, in many ways, oft unnoticed beliefs about pretty much everything. So whether it was beliefs about what good coffee was and or what good coffee ought to cost, beliefs about work, beliefs about appropriate attire, beliefs about eating at meetings, not eating at meetings, working on Sunday, not working on Sunday. I mean, we have beliefs. As the more I understood, I realized we have beliefs about everything. How many hours is the right number of hours to work in a week? What does quality time mean with your significant other? How much should you have, in quotes, et cetera, et cetera. So I started to look at beliefs as the root system of our lives, because although we didn't really talk about them generally, and many of us, me included, were not really cognizant of what they were or how they had been formed, everything pretty much that was coming up above the surface of our lives, i.e. the actions that we took, the decisions that we made, the comments that we contributed to meetings, et cetera, were coming from that root system. And there was a really obviously direct correlation. So I started to look at that. And then Amy Emberling from the Bakehouse, managing partner there early on, asked the same question sort of that you did in a little different way, which is, what's the difference between beliefs and values? And what I settled on, and I won't say that it's necessarily correct, but it's the one that we've been definition and framing that we've been working with ever since, is just that values are what we would call here at Zingerman's guiding principles, are also beliefs, but they're the ethically based ones. So they're beliefs that we're not really interested in changing. A lot of the other beliefs realistically will change. So I don't know that, I think that our belief on our list in servant leadership is a good example. It supports our ethics, but I don't know that there's anything unethical about not adopting or adapting Robert Greenleaf's approach to servant leadership. Believing in humility is on the statement of beliefs. It's not one of our guiding principles. So metaphorically, if beliefs were the root system, just for my own mental images, I started to look at guiding principles or values, or are the, on a tree, you can imagine on a big old tree, how some of the roots come up above the ground and you can see them. Those are what I started to look at in my head visually as our values. So values, quick answer, are also beliefs, but they're ethically based ones, not really ones that we're interested in altering. Other beliefs, like whether it's appropriate to have food at meetings, nothing really ethical or unethical about it, but it's important to get clear on it so people don't feel pushed out of place or uncomfortable, unnecessarily uncomfortable. Does that help at all?
It does. Yeah. And I'm going to share this quote here that I think that's also in our statement of beliefs that I thought also encapsulates it well. Give me just 1 second, get to the right view here. There we go. All right. All right, and we will get to full screen here. Okay. There's simply a feeling of conviction or certainly that something is real or true. They're based on our past experiences and what others have taught us. Beliefs are our best guess at reality. Our mental model of how the world appears to work. Our knowledge of the real world is limited. So to get by, we rely on our beliefs instead. They're the principles and rules by which we assume the world works. So as we are in the defining part of the kind of what of beliefs, because I want to make sure and honor all of the what and the why and the how in terms of the definition of our webinar today. One thing that was really powerful for me when we first started talking about beliefs organizationally is having positive, neutral, or negative beliefs and thinking about those outcomes. And you referenced the that work group. And so I don't know if you'd be willing to share a little bit more maybe about that experience, because I feel like that also was formative as you were kind of thinking more about the beliefs and acknowledging that we can't really get to a positive outcome if we start with negative beliefs.
Yeah, so I think I believe and it's been interesting, I'll say over the last 4 or 5 years, Katie and Emily and Mara will probably have the same experience, how much more frequently the word belief, I believe, is used in conversations inside the ZCAB versus I think. It's quite interesting, and I don't have any data, but I would say anecdotally it's increased quite a bit. But I believe that one of the things that has helped our work here a lot, and I think in some ways I learned it from Maggie at Zing with her training teachings, is to try to come up with simple models that honor the natural complexity of real life. So there's a common complaint out in society that the world is too complicated, but the reality is it just is complicated. In fact, it's on my next list of the next natural laws. What we can do, though, is to be able to find ways to simplify the complexity in a way that we can understand it and work with it, but that still honor that complexity. So I would suggest the 3 steps to great service is a great way to do that. It doesn't tell you exactly what to do with the guest, but it gives you a framework and a guideline through which to approach it. So with that in mind, I started to imagine beliefs and the root system as 3 broad categories: negative beliefs, neutral beliefs, and positive beliefs. And then, not being either a farmer or a physicist, but I could figure out if you have negative beliefs and those are the root system, then the outcomes are going to be guaranteed to be negative. Neutral beliefs wouldn't be too much, and wouldn't do too much, and positive beliefs would create positive outcomes. And then it just became super clear to me, like there's just one can literally not get positive outcomes from negative beliefs. We can create a lot of action, so we can get people fired, we can create fights in our family, we can overthrow governments, there's a lot of action that can be generated by the passion around negative beliefs, and it may be passion that was appropriate. There's problems in society that enrage people and upset people for in my opinion, very legitimate reasons. Still, I've learned from everybody from Socrates to Grace Lee Boggs have all said the same thing, which is that you can't get positive outcomes from negative beliefs. So that said, to be clear, one can still acknowledge that there are very real problems. This is not to say there aren't any, and it's not to adopt a Pollyanna-ish approach to problems. It's just you could have positive beliefs about problems, like we can make a difference and do something about this, or negative beliefs about problems, which is essentially we're victims and there's not much we can do.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Would you be willing to share about a time that an organizational belief has changed over time?
Well, Zoom is a good current one.
Yeah.
I certainly would not have been a proponent of online meetings, but that's certainly changed. But I guess thinking more meaningfully, I mean, there's so many. Coffee. When we opened in 1982, I'm not historically a coffee drinker. It's a peripheral product. I didn't particularly like it myself, so we tried to find one that was pretty good. When we opened our own coffee business, which will be about 18 years ago now, coffee became a signature product with our name on it. And so it started to really, for me personally, and I think organizationally, the depth and strength of our beliefs about coffee really changed. I mean, it's a very simple one, but just a concrete reality of it.
Yeah. All right. And Amina had a great question. Is in terms of the positive, neutral, and negative beliefs, is this different from the power of positive thinking?
Well, I'm not sure which. I haven't read every book on the power of positive thinking. And I'm not an expert in it. I guess I would just stay with what I have. I think it's clearly, or I believe it's clearly related. But I'm not from the school of like, you just think good thoughts and everything's going to happen the way you want. There's a lot of work to be done. It's just what I learned from the belief cycle is the work that I choose to do and the energy and effort with which I engage it will be pretty drastically altered by my beliefs. So if I take on, Katie asked me to do something, but I don't really want to do it, but I kind of go along, subtly recreating my 12-year-old self responding to my mother, I will go through the motions. The work will not be great because I don't really believe it's a good idea, but I don't want to tell Katie that, or I want to, whatever. So conversely, if I have positive beliefs about the work she's asked me to do, and I'm like, this is an amazing project, I'm very excited to get behind this, I will inevitably do way more work. The quality of the engagement will be higher. My learning level will be higher. My energy when I share it with other people will be higher, which will impact the way they respond to it and their beliefs, which is basically what that cycle is all about. So to be clear, I'm not saying just believe that everybody's going to make more money next year and it's going to happen. There's work that we need to do to support that, but believing that we can create an organization in which people across all organizational levels can have enhanced income will help me commit to making that happen. And then tied in with visioning, planning, and day-to-day work, et cetera, we can really turn that into a reality.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it relating in this way, although when you say it like that, it's similar to visioning in that you set an intention and then the wheels can get in motion in that way and help that self-fulfilling prophecy and same way visioning does.
Yeah, and visioning in essence, Katie, includes the beliefs in the future that you're describing. So this is why there are occasions you and I have worked with people, and we've probably done it ourselves at times, where we wrote a vision more out of the belief we needed to write one to make somebody else happy than because we really believed in it. And then almost inevitably, we will never do the work that it takes to make that happen. I mean, I hope here in our organization, that's an exception, certainly not the norm, but I'm sure it's happened. But visioning is basically a set of positive beliefs about the future. And like all things, I mean, the more we work with it, the more we share it, the more enthusiasm, the more we engage with it, most of the time, the more strongly held those beliefs become, the deeper the roots go, the more likely we are to hold course when challenging moments come, like pandemics. because we've already mentally committed and believe in that future.
Yeah. All right. Shifting into the why, which is some exciting things as we think about the statement of beliefs. What are some of the compelling reasons to explore one's beliefs, both professionally as well as personally?
Well, if you follow that belief cycle, which I did, this is sort of what blew my mind, then you realize that 90% of the time, what happens in our lives, we're creating a lot of it. So I'm not suggesting that the new dishwasher created the worst manager in the restaurant. I'm not suggesting that we created racism, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot going on in our lives that we did not create. That said, it is clear to me that if I believe a new staff member in our organization is not good and really doesn't fit well with what we do for whatever inappropriate or appropriate reasons, if I have that belief, follow that cycle around, my action when I deal with that person will not be optimal. Even if my words are okay, my energy will still not be great. And then we didn't really talk about it, but the little filter that's between our beliefs and our actions will alter what I see. So if I believe they're not really very good, where that nice red line is, then when they make a small mistake, it's going to reinforce for me that they were no good. Conversely, if I had the belief that they were going to be awesome and they made a small mistake, I would say to myself probably something like, wow, this is so great that they're willing to take a risk, right? So the action is the same, but our beliefs around it reframe our perception of the situation. So if I believe they're not good, they make a small mistake, inside I'm scowling up a storm. Even if I say, don't worry about it, the likelihood is very high that they'll pick up on my energy. When another manager or another person asks me how they're doing, it's unlikely I'm going to give them glowing reviews. What happens to them? They're picking up on this energy, even if it's unconscious. They're picking up on the way the manager or me deals with the other people versus how they get dealt with. They start to disengage from the work. They're more anxious. Their confidence levels going down. What happens to their action? When their confidence levels down and they're engaged, they're worried about the manager's reactions. They're not focused on what we want them to focus on. So the quality of their work likely goes down. And I'm like, see, I knew they were no good. Now, I'm not saying this is the power of positive thinking thing. I'm not saying that I just believe in them and then they're magically transformed into the best employee we ever have. And I'm not saying everybody I believed was going to do well did. And I'm not saying everybody I believed was going to do poorly failed. However, there's a pretty direct correlation in my experience that it's pretty unlikely they're going to succeed. It's happened, but it's unlikely they'll succeed if the people that are managing them believe they're not going to.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Now, why do you find the work of exploring our organizational beliefs so important? So maybe I don't know if you feel like the last one answered that, but.
No, I think it's super important. So first of all, when I started to, when I started to realize this about my own, just thinking personally, if I have negative beliefs about another person, it could be my neighbor, it could be the person who works at the drugstore. If I have negative beliefs about them, I am likely most of the time creating the tension that will exist in that relationship. And I don't mean me just changing my belief is going to immediately alter everything, but it's kind of a prerequisite for a more positive long-term outcome. When I started to understand that, it started to impact, I think pretty clearly, I had a lot of positive beliefs already by this time. It was 5-6 years ago, we'd already been in business for 30-something years and had written a bunch of books and we were doing Zing Train. That said, I still realized I had negative beliefs and it was important for me to start to weed those out of my intellectual and emotional garden. And I'm still engaged in that and I probably will be for the rest of my life. Organizationally. So, if we do not share the same beliefs, we will almost inevitably end up arguing over tactics and strategy when the real issue is we just don't agree on our beliefs. And we could agree to disagree. That might be for the best for everybody. That said, let's take spirit of generosity, right? So an abundance mentality. So if we choose to believe in abundance mentality, we choose an abundance mindset, then It's a real life issue here in the ZCAB. When the bakehouse takes on a new wholesale client, then I go, this is awesome. It's great for everybody. The bakehouse does better. More people will learn about our products out in the community. They're more likely to come to the bakehouse, the deli, the roadhouse, whatever, the creamery to pick stuff up. They might try something at that other store that they wouldn't have known about, and maybe they're from out of town. Mail order sales could go up. They might look online and they find out about Zingtrain, and they're probably a leader because a lot of our customers are in leadership roles, and they start coming in for Zingtrain. So that's sort of based on a belief in abundance and generosity. If I, on the other hand, have belief that it's a zero-sum game, there's a limited amount of resources out in the community, limited customers. It's a narrow, or what Carol Dweck called maybe a fixed mindset. Then my reaction is completely different. This is terrible. It's going to cut into our sales. They don't care about us. They only care about selling their own stuff. And now pretty soon we have a lot of argument and a big disagreement. So those two beliefs are, there's plenty of evidence in quotes for each of those beliefs out in the world. If we don't agree on them, we're going to end up arguing negatively, and I think distractingly and destructively over the decision to have this new wholesale customer come into our world. Whereas what we really need to do is having a caring conversation about the fact that our beliefs are in opposition. Does that help?
It does. I think it's a really good segue also, because as we were talking about this webinar, and you gave an analogy that I thought was really powerful, that I think speaks to how can we bring our individual selves to work and honor the beliefs of the organization. So you gave a mac and cheese example that I thought totally nailed it. So I'd love if you share it.
Let's see if I can remember it.
No pressure.
So what I've started to say is because I'm still learning about this too. I mean, the statement of beliefs we've been working on for a couple of years, and we're just formally now rolling it out. And it's going to take 2, 3, 4 years to really get our collective brains around it. And even then, I'm sure we'll still be learning. But so I started to look at the beliefs, statement of beliefs, the beliefs on the statement of beliefs. I started to imagine them essentially as the ingredients for the intellectual cooking, so to speak, that we do. So the statement of beliefs is not in the least intended to suggest that those of us who work here need to hold these beliefs out of work. It's none of my business. But they're the raw materials that we want to commit to using at a certain quality level or a certain style, from which we can form the intellectual decisions or do the cooking that we're going to do. So if we, as I don't know exactly what I said, Katie, but if we were to hire a new line cook at the Roadhouse, which we are hiring, by the way, and if anybody knows somebody who's interested, send them on in. If we were to hire a new line cook at the Roadhouse, we wouldn't just say to he or she, hey, we make macaroni and cheese. It's a house specialty. I'm sure you grew up on it. Feel free to bring in whatever noodles and cheese you've been using, or how your mom did it, or your dad did it, or your grandparents did. Like, we wouldn't say that, because they could follow the exact recipe. But if they were to use whatever Prince, I won't use a brand name. If they were to use a low supermarket industrial level pasta and a processed cheese, technically they might be seeming to follow the ingredient list or the recipe that was written, but the reality of the flavor and texture would be like night and day different. So this is not saying what the outcome should be, but it's saying up front, like, we're not going to cook with industrial pasta. We're going to use artisan pasta. So when you're at home, it's really none of my business if you want to have a lot of negative beliefs about your significant other. I don't recommend it if you ask my advice personally, but you're probably not. Go for it. It's really fine. In the same way, I don't judge people who work here if they want to stop at McDonald's or Starbucks or eat the Kraft macaroni and cheese my mom made for us out of the box when I was a kid. There's no value judgment on them as a human being. It's just when we're here at Zingerman's, we're going to agree that full flavored traditional food is what we do. So this list is really more for how we're going to approach the challenges that we have, whether that's dealing with a difficult customer service situation, which we all do every day, or whether it's how to approach a conflict between a couple staff members who aren't getting along, or how we're going to approach any kind of strategic decision that we're going to make.
All right. There's a timely question that I think I'd love to interject from Andy, Who should be responsible for coming up with beliefs? Only the CEO alone, or the leadership team, or other key employees along with the CEO?
Well, Andy, that's a great question. And I guess the answer would depend on your beliefs. So here, because we believe that, let me find it on the list here.
Number one, I think. I don't know, they're not numbered. Maybe you're thinking of a different one.
Well, I'm going to find the one that says the more people we involve in running the
Oh,
business, the better
yeah,
it's
there you
going to
go.
go.
Yeah.
Here it is. We believe the more people we involve in ownership, the more effective the organization will be. So that's one of them. Well, it's on the list, so I'm gonna be humble and say I'm gonna let Mara look for it or something while I'm doing it. But the point is that we believe that the more people we involve in running the business, the more diverse the conversation, the contributors to the conversation are, the better it's going to go. So out of that belief set, then we involve as many people as possible. So you can see, if you've been around us for a while, and let's say you know our bottom line change process, it's a system, a recipe, and it's based on that belief that involving more people quicker in the process will create a better outcome. That said, there are organizations, and I'm not value judging them, that would suggest that I would suggest have a different set of beliefs, that they don't have time or don't want to make time or don't believe the contributions will be valuable. And so, thank you, Katie. And so then the decisions that follow from that will be the CEO just decides and sends out the list. I would suggest either way is better than not having agreement on the beliefs, because when we don't, we're continuing to argue about what plants come up in our organizational garden when we really have discrepancies and disparity around what roots are growing in the ground. So I think either way is probably better in terms of honoring our commitment to clarity and clear expectations. My belief is that the more we involve people, the better, as per our bottom line change process, which is in the pamphlet of the same name. Part of the process is to get clear early on how the decision would be made. Here, the decision was made by consensus of the partners group. So that's, I don't know how many people, me, Katie, and 17 or something other people, 3 of whom are staff partners, which is another conversation, but also is a good tactical way to demonstrate our commitment to the beliefs on this list. Consulting with the rest of the organization. So I don't know how many, but quite a few people inputted over time. But the final formal decision came at the partner group level.
All right. Thank you for that question, Andy. Thank you, Ari. So you worked for a long time on your book about beliefs. And then how was that transition? I know it was over time, but coming up with a statement of beliefs, how did you transition from like, okay, this is really helpful, to maybe we should come up with a statement of beliefs for our organization?
Well, it's a good I guess that's actually a belief that's changed in the organization going back to, and it's still going to be changing, because I guarantee, as you and I know, there's always resistance to all new things, regardless of the integrity and quality of the new thing. So as I was working on it, it started to make sense to me, but of course, no one else had thought about it, and no one else was thinking about it in the way that I was thinking about it, because I was the one, for better and for worse, that was spending a lot of time reading and studying and, using my time off to study beliefs. And as I started to realize their impact, then as per the belief cycle, I started to see more and more stuff. And then as I would talk about beliefs, more people would, of course, send me more information about beliefs, and people started gifting me books, and I'd have more conversations about beliefs. So I end up all the way, whatever, in New Hampshire, and somebody else who's not paying attention to beliefs, not out of malice, they're just busy and they have a lot else going on and they're feeling a little overwhelmed, ends up in Montana. So now we're in completely different spots, yet I continue, as I worked on it, to feel like this really had merit and value. So because we don't work in a hierarchical, autocratic setting, then it's not as simple. And I'm not saying bad, I believe it's good, but we're not in a setting where I just go, okay, you guys, starting on Monday, here's the list of beliefs, you're all going to follow it. So when one works this way, then it is partly a process of slowly but surely helping people to change their own beliefs, because you can't force anybody to change it. And so this is really 3 or 4 years of work of conversing, sharing my belief in it, having people, some people say that was a great idea. Some people say it didn't make any sense and we didn't have time for it, et cetera, et cetera. So we're moving forward. And as per all changes, there's still a lot of work to be done because the formal rollout doesn't mean at all that we're really using it. And then we need to really start to build it into our systems, our culture, and our daily work. So just concrete example, because I happened to see the email this morning. Bob Bennett, who's the head chef at the Roadhouse, sends out a note to the kitchen staff and CC's actually the whole restaurant staff every week. And it's got some updates on concrete tactical things. It's got some background on organizational work, some information about or history about one or two of the food items, et cetera. And as of last week, he started putting one of the beliefs in that's his choice to talk about. So this week he put in the one about open book management and talked about why it matters to him. So that's a concrete way that it's going to start to make its way deeper and deeper into the organizational soil, but that takes a couple of years.
Right. That was my next question, where I feel like, I mean, oftentimes, especially in our training work, where people want things, you know, let's do a training on it and let's do a vision or let's do some service training, and then like things are going to be instantly better. In fact, I was on a client call not too long ago, and the matriarch was like, and this is going to kind of be like magic, right? Like wink, wink. To your point around the time that it takes. I mean, this has been in the works for a number of years. So I think it's also helpful. I remember when I started in the organization and we were doing some change, and you're like, any new product takes about 2 years to really get going. And I was like, whoa, that's a long time. I wonder if that's true. And it's probably like 2 to 3 years. And so we try to be patient. But I think if those that are looking for quick wins, this is not probably for you.
Well, and I think, Katie, what you're describing it is a set of beliefs, right, which is impacting our work. So that belief is manifested here. It's not on this list, but it is in the 12 natural laws of business that it takes a lot longer to make something great happen than most of us have been led to believe. So if we share that belief, then we take action accordingly. So when sales don't boom in the first 3 weeks, generally in our organization, more often than not, people don't bail on the new product, right? That said, much of the world is operating with a different set of beliefs. Not for me to judge them. It's just going to lead to a radically different approach to the product rollout.
Yeah. All right. I think I want to physically show the statement of beliefs because I think it's helpful, and it's like weird with all right, this is the book itself, the book proper. But I put a few beliefs up on a slide so that folks can see, you know, what are we talking about? There's 34 of them. And Ari, you've mentioned a couple of them. Let me share my screen here so we can have folks see a little bit more of what we're talking about. So these are ones that, well, since I was putting the slides together, I got to pick ones that I liked. Not that I have any favorites, but I think it's helpful to see like what are we talking about when we're thinking about statement of beliefs. There's 34. There's a wide range of kind of areas covered. You mentioned open book from Bob. I really love this first one because I think that was a realization that you started sharing and teaching about, that in our service work, everyone's authorized to do whatever it takes to make things right for a customer. And then you bridge that with really thinking about leadership. If everyone views themselves as a leader, then they're not waiting for other people to, to act in ways that are going to help impact the organization in positive ways. So anyhow, I thought it would be helpful to see some of these here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Katie, I mean, all of these, the first one we'll use just because you brought it up. I mean, it's not, I mean, I think I would suggest it supports our ethics or guiding principles, but there's nothing ethical per se about everyone who works in the organization believing they're a leader, they're responsible for for leadership or not. That said, it leads to very different, no pun intended, leads to very different work. So if we can be clear about this up front, like you start here and we give you this and we go over it, I'm not suggesting that within 5 minutes, the new employee has altered their beliefs. That said, we've been in the same way, like we tell them the 3 steps to great service. It doesn't mean they do them all perfectly. Even those of us like you and I have been here for years still don't do them perfectly, right? But at least we're being clear about the expectations as per our training compact. This is our expectation. If you're working here 6 hours a week and you're 17, you're still responsible for leadership, right? So it's a very different set of beliefs than what people will have experienced in most of their other jobs and in much of their life and society. So being clear about it can really help. It's not about ethics. It is important. I could dive in and answer. I think Sam maybe asked about how often you review. I don't know because we're only rolling it out now. I settled on, I haven't even told people here, but I started thinking 3 years seemed like roughly a good time because as per what Katie said, it takes about 2 or 3 years for this to sink into the soil. So if we were to review them every 6 months, it seemed like a lot. Every 16 years seemed like too long. I kind of had 3 in my mind. That said, because everyone's responsible for leadership and because we believe in the bottom line change process, anyone here could start tomorrow to propose a change on anything on this list. So I'm not suggesting that's likely to happen, but somebody could come back tomorrow and Katie could say, you know what, I read some new books. I talked to 16 other people, and I actually believe it's not a good idea for everybody to be responsible for leadership. And then she would start step 1, compelling reasons for making a change. Step 2, what's the vision of what's going to happen when this change occurs? And per the earlier question, that final decision would still be made by the partners group, but there could be a whole conversation engaged, and it's impossible to know the outcome of that until it actually happens.
Yeah. All right. Emily, why don't we get to a couple more questions and then we can get back to a couple more slides.
Thank you. Wonderful. I am happy to get some of these great questions asked. So how do you, Gilbert had a great question of how do you weed out negative beliefs? I know you spoke a little bit about negative beliefs, but I'm wondering if you can speak explicitly to that.
Yeah, so I wrote a couple pieces about weeding. Leaders are weeders, which did not mean you're smoking pot, although you may be. It's not high on my list of beliefs one way or the other. But because part of our work, I realize, becomes to gently and with dignity weed the organizational garden. And having started to weed, both because Tammy, my significant other, is a farmer, and then also because I started to try to use my time better when I was on phone calls. I realized I could be walking around the Roadhouse or Zing Train or whatever, and I could be weeding while I was talking on the phone. And I kind of liked it, and it gave me a sense of accomplishment. I learned the obvious. Everybody who works in a garden knows if you pull the weed when it's new, it's really easy. If you wait until the weed has been in there for years, it's really hard. I don't want to get into all the details, but it's probably 5 or 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I ended up needing to do clearing of a field. And some of the weeds were taller than me, and some of them had root systems so deep, like I'm not by any means the strongest human in the world remotely, but even I at 6 feet, whatever, was unable to pull them out by myself. So that's how deep the roots were. And I think this is true for beliefs in life. So how do we do it? Depends on your beliefs. If you believe in autocracy and you want to be belligerent, then you might yell at people about it. Here, I would hope we would do it with dignity and respect and try to help people to do what I would suggest is a little bit of digging in their intellectual soil or their background of their own soil. Where did this belief come from? Let's look at this new list now. Is a great coaching and teaching tool. This is the little pocket list of the beliefs. So let's go over it. It says at the top of the list, we believe leading with positive beliefs make a difference. So let's look at the situation that has just happened. Did you let's just look. Do you believe you started with like what beliefs did you have about the situation and the other person that was involved? Let's hear what he or she has to say. Okay, now let's see. Are those negative beliefs or positive beliefs? I mean, it's not necessarily an easy conversation, but at least it's giving us some framework to guide it. If they started with negative beliefs, then I can try to coach them. Well, let's talk about what might some positive beliefs have been about that situation. Now, if they have no life experience with that, they may look at me like I'm speaking in a language they don't understand, because in essence, I am. But over time, I can give them examples. And this is really no different than if you have a coffee shop and people made cappuccino the way that they made it in all their other jobs. It's not a judgment of them as people or of the old coffee shops. It's just, this is how we do it here at Zingerman's. And when they do it wrong, which they're gonna, and everybody who's trained people to make coffee drinks knows they're gonna slide back under pressure to the way that they did it in their old jobs that they had for 3 or 4 years before they worked here. We just need to gently keep correcting them. At some point, it becomes a performance issue. If I've coached you for 6 months on choosing positive beliefs and you continue to start daily with negative ones, becomes a performance issue. Those of you wearing the HR hat.
Yeah. That's great. Did you have something, Katie, that you wanted to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, let's answer 1 or 2 more, and then we can keep going.
I also dropped in your 2 blog posts. All right, leaders are leaders.
Thank you, Emily. You are doing an awesome job.
If anyone would like to check those out, you are most welcome.
I learned a lot from doing the work on weeding. And also, by the way, those of you who do weeding, even if you don't, you probably know this, but the obvious, when you clip a weed at the surface line, what happens? Well, we make it go away in quotes, but the reality is the root system's still there. And then it turns out also it actually grows back faster and stronger. So this is one of the challenges of change in organizations and change in society is that if we get people to stop the bad behavior, but their beliefs really haven't changed, it's not really likely to have meaningful impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's frustrating, but it's the reality.
Right, right. All right, we have another question here that's, what will it look like for Zingerman's to roll out these beliefs across the company? Do we have a process or question mark?
Yeah, so we've mapped out some action steps at an organizational level. One of them is tomorrow we have a town hall from 1 to 3 on Zoom, where we'll be going over a lot of this internally as we're going over it with you today, try to answer questions. Then my hope is each business is also working on a rollout within there. I can just share, because I've been doing it at the Roadhouse. We've done it. We presented that briefly at the huddle. The managers team has had probably 4 conversations over the last 6 months where we've looked at the drafts, looked for examples of where we saw it working well, and looked for examples of where we were falling short, because we all fall short. So we've had 3 or 4 conversations around that. I've seen some people in great ways start to use this in their leadership coaching around difficult situations. So that's working. Then the booklets came, I don't know, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago. So now there's a sheet and everybody on staff is getting one along with the pocket sheet. And I mean, it's all sort of basic marketing stuff. There's posters up about the town hall. I mentioned Bob, who's the head chef, is picking a belief of his own volition. He's picking one to go over it. They've gone over it twice in the chef's meeting over the last month. I mean, so the whole point to Katie's conversation earlier is just, it takes a long time to get this into the culture, probably 3 years, and we're maybe a couple months in. So we got a really long way to go, but hopefully we're headed in the right direction. Inevitably, like in all work, even in the garden, some things will take more quickly, some things won't. Some parts of some departments, the manager will be super bought in and believe in this, and at their department, this will sink roots quickly. Other managers, for not out of malice, they're just busy and they're not bought in, so they don't believe in it, so they'll do very little. They'll have neutral beliefs about it. They won't do the extra work. 3 other employees will say it's a bad idea, and it'll go on the shelf and be done. So just like everything else, it's going to take a while.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we probably have time for one more question here, although we've got several great questions. So we will
Okay.
to you, Ari. We can get back to folks with answers.
Okay.
So Elliot says, beliefs seem valuable at many different levels: explicit corporate beliefs, values, smaller team beliefs, working agreements in each relationship between teams. Do you believe it is valuable to make these things explicit?
Well, yes, I do, because having grown up in a loving dysfunctional family, I'm pretty good at figuring out what the beliefs might be and how to behave appropriately, but why make it that hard? And this is what I learned from Maggie about training 25 years, plus years ago, is just, if you know what you want the service to be like, why let the person screw it up first and then get mad at them or correct them? Why not just teach them from the beginning, this is how we do it here? Again, no value judgment of their old employer, no value judgment of them for what they choose to do in a different workplace, but this is how we do it at Zingerman. So this is really no different. In essence, it's a little bit like, people don't know where the furniture or the walls are, and we turn the lights off, and then eventually they're going to bump into them. But why make them go through getting their nose smashed, their glasses broken, and a lot of sore shins when we could just turn the lights on? And if they don't like where the furniture is, either A, they can choose to work elsewhere, which there's nothing wrong with, or B, they could make a proposal to move it, but you can't just start shoving it out of the way. Like Katie goes to the bathroom and she comes back and somebody moved all the desks in Zing Train's offices because they didn't like the way it was. It's not going to work. Very quickly, I shared in e-news a few weeks ago, and it's in the summer issue of Zingerman's News that will be out in a few days. The story from, we mentioned baseball earlier, which I have not watched a baseball game in 15 years probably, but because I grew up with the belief about baseball, I still secretly follow it, even though I don't really follow it. And I still, because I grew up on the south side of Chicago, root for the White Sox, even though I know intellectually it makes no difference in the world and I could care less. Intellectually, I still secretly root for him. Anyway, there's a guy named Yermin Mercedes who, long story short, bounced around the minor leagues for like 10 years. And just this year, for the first time, made the White Sox at the age of 28, which might be young in many fields, but in baseball is pretty old to be a rookie. Anyway, through a series of injuries, whatever, he starts the season doing really well, like really, really well. And one day last month, the White Sox are beating Minnesota 15-4. It's the top of the ninth inning. It's in Minnesota. The White Sox are batting 15-4, so they're way ahead. Yermin Mercedes on a 3-0, 3 balls, no strikes pitch, where you're whatever hits a home run, which seems awesome, except for his manager, who's 40, 50 years older than he is, says in public that it was terrible that he did this and it violated the unwritten rules of baseball. So he basically humiliated his employee in public for doing what no one told him not to do, when he actually did what they pay them to do. But there's this secret rule that you should have known, but we didn't tell you what it was. And I'm just going to say the guy's batting average has dropped 75 points since that event. Now, maybe it's for some other reason. There's certainly other factors. However, generally being humiliated for not knowing what was obvious to those around you, but no one told you, is a huge issue. And this plays out in very real ways in organizations around inclusion, around diversity, around hiring people of different ages, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, et cetera, because there's things that are considered normal in one setting that are completely not normal. They have nothing to do with ethics, but we're not being clear with people.
Yeah.
And we all pay the price, because the organization loses. That many times they stay, but they're angry. They make bad decisions. Then we have to correct them, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'd love to know is what, like when we are in the statement of beliefs, what we, not only do we have the list of the beliefs, but then there's supplemental supporting pages after that that says, when we're in alignment, this is what it looks like. And then when we're not in alignment, this is what it looks like. So I think this isn't just like a list, but it really helps to describe what we mean by this belief. And to your point, Ari, around new hires seeing the statement of beliefs, I added a quote from Claude Steele about, Claude wrote the book Whistling Vivaldi and studied Stereotype Threat. So if I enter a work environment concerned with how am I perceived as a woman, and I'm going to have that as my lens. And then I'm going to worry about, overcoming some of these things if I'm in a male-dominated environment. And when everyone comes to work with different weights that they're carrying on their back, and if we can level the field, if you will, and provide, to your point around getting those roadblocks out of the way, not moving the furniture and not telling people, we can let people know in advance. This is kind of the rules of engagement, if you will. I don't know, really love that terminology, but
Yeah.
It can help foster a more, to your point, inclusive environment. And there were some questions about like, well, how do you even start with this? So I don't know if you want to talk about this, I believe, or things of that nature. Where do you suggest people start?
Well, I was going to say also Claude Steele wrote the foreword for part 4, which is the book about beliefs. So particularly appropriate choice, and also a great guy who used to live across the street from the deli back in the day. But anyway, well, you are going to design the work to help Zing trained clients come up with their own statement of beliefs, just like we do visioning, is my hope. In the meantime, to your point, in the book, there's a number of exercises around this, not in the statement of beliefs booklet, but in the power of beliefs around business, about business. This I believe exercise is essentially, for those who know our visioning work, it's essentially hot pen. So free writing around beliefs, and getting clarity on what beliefs, what you believe has helped you organizationally to succeed in the ways that you are. And then also taking a look at what, to your earlier point about what things look like when they're working and not working, there may be beliefs that are holding you back. So they may have been beliefs that have been an integral piece of the organization to date, but when you look at the vision of where you want to be 10 years from now, it becomes clear that those beliefs will need to change. So it's not a belief I have, but if you are in an organization where the leader, founder, CEO, whatever, is super heroic and held up to be this savior who comes up with all the answers, but they're going to retire, that belief clearly needs to change, because otherwise you're basically left headless, and people will start to panic. So there's oftentimes beliefs that we have used to get us to where we are, but need to change. So I would start with those, and then in the same way you come to agreement on anything else, sharing conversation, talking about implications, and then at some point coming to a decision.
Awesome. We have a number of questions that we didn't have time to answer today, but we will get answers out to you. We have a couple opportunities around beliefs coming up, and so I'd love to turn it back to Emily, who can share about some of those.
Yeah.
And then we'll give it to Ari for the final word.
That sounds great. Yeah, I just want to send a quick note of thank you to everyone for all of the questions today. It's really, really fun to have a queue of questions. Although I'm sorry we couldn't answer them live, it's fun to have some questions that we'll get back to you with answers to. Yes, so we have a new masterclass coming in August, kicking off August 3rd, Tuesday, August 3rd, that Ari is co-leading.
I didn't know about that.
You are, I don't know if you knew that, Ari, but you're co-leading that with our founder, Zing Train's founder, Maggie Bayless. And it is the power of beliefs in business, taking mindful leadership to the next level. Now, Mara just dropped a link to get on the VIP list for this new masterclass. VIPs, not only do you get the cred of being a VIP, but you also get early access to registration and $250 off the price of registration for 48 hours. So it's good to be a VIP. Yes, I think that is all we have from a housekeeping perspective around beliefs. I also just want to make a quick note to say thank you to you both and to everyone, and letting folks know that we will be sending out the recording and the slides to you in the next few days. I believe Mara is also going to drop a link to a survey, a webinar survey.
She just did.
Oh, she did. Fantastic. She's so on. So I'll turn it over back to you, Ari, if you want to have the last word.
Well, my email is ari@zingermans.com. Most of you have it already, but if you don't, feel free to also send me questions. Tomorrow in the e-news, right? Tomorrow's Wednesday, will be my beliefs about names. So you can learn about that. I guess I'll just close with, I'm still learning about this. I have a lot to learn. It's been pretty mind-blowing. I hope we've conveyed a little bit of the impact that it's had. We're all in this together is really one of my beliefs. And as we continue to learn, I hope to be able to continue to share more and more. I do think that this work of putting the statement of beliefs out as imperfectly as we will do it, and as long as it will take to make it really a daily reality in our organizational lives, that this is as radical a move as our first vision, Zingerman's 2009, as putting our guiding principles and our mission statement in writing, putting our training compact in writing, and that 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, this booklet will, inevitably some of the beliefs will have been altered. That's good. But that the idea of doing this will have become the norm within our own organization. And I can see it, that it's going to become the norm in more and more organizations. There's really no reason to have it, not to have it, other than that it's awkward to have the conversations, which I totally understand. But having agreement on the beliefs really makes an enormous difference. If you doubt me, just look at the state of the country without getting into politics. You can just see how radically different outcomes, perspectives, and assessments of what truth is, back to the question we didn't answer. People's perception of truth is so altered by what their beliefs are. And if you look back in history, you can see how many beliefs have changed around medicine, health, role of women, race, education, food. All of these beliefs have changed. So getting agreement on this really, I believe, is an important commitment that I can make, and that I believe, need to make to the rest of our organizations to help people's work lives go better, and through that, the lives that they lead outside of work. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to learning together as we roll this out. Thanks to Emily and Mara and Katie for all the work to put this session together so I could just log on and share thoughts. And thanks to all of you for logging in. Hi, Klaus. Hope things in Germany are good, and I look forward to more conversation to come.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for being here.